Most of the default templates that come with Revit include some standard floor plans and elevations to get us started, but none of them include any sections. And sections are actually one of my favorite kinds of views that we can create in Revit. Sections are real easy to create. They're live cuts of your model, and you can create them just about anywhere where you need to get a better look at what's going on in the model. I'm in a project called Section, and we're just going to cut a couple sections in here and take a look at how the tool works. So let's think about an area where we want to get a better look at how things are coming together. And I'm thinking that this stair area here with the balcony up above is a good choice. I'll start off by zooming in on that location. And I'm going to create a couple different sections that cut through this stairwell area and show us what's going on there. So I'm going to do the first one right here. And so to get there, you go to the quick access toolbar here, and there's a section tool. You can also find it on the view tab. And I'll click that. And all you really need to do is click 2 points to create the section. So I'm going to click right here next to the stair, but roughly in the middle. And then you see this line I'm drawing is going right down the middle of that run up the stair. And I'm going to go the full width of the building here. So I'm going to pull it all the way out and over here and then click again. So it just takes 2 clicks. And when you do, you get several things. You'll get a symbol here. It's got some grips on it so you can fine tune it. And then if you zoom out a little bit, or pan actually is what I'm doing, and I'll pan and zoom slightly, you'll see this dashed bluish box out here that has some grips on each side. Revit will automatically try to make the extent of this section match the geometry that you have created. Another way to show you that is if I just kind of come over here to empty space. If I were to create another section over here, you'll notice that it's just sort of a generic depth because there's no building there. It doesn't know what to create. So I'm going to undo that with Control Z. But this one, when we created it, it went the full depth of the building. So this is why the default template doesn't include any sections, because there's no geometry, so there's really nothing to look at. After you've created the section, if you look over here on the project browser, you'll see a new sections category. And if we expand that, we're going to see section 1. Now, one of the things that I always like to do is right-click on the section that gets created and rename it to something a little bit more descriptive. So instead of section 1, I'm going to just change that to section at balcony and click OK. Now you can double click it here to open it, or you can right click the section line itself and choose go to view. Either one will do the same thing, and that will open up that view, and you're now looking at that section. So we cut through the building at that location that we drew with the 2 clicks, and then we're seeing everything beyond from that point. Now if I zoom in slightly here, you can start to see the walls and so forth that are a little bit more bold that we're cutting through. We've got a ceiling plane here. There's a guardrail right here. This is the floor slab for the balcony itself. And then here's the stair. So we could start to use this section as a way of understanding how things are coming together. Do we have the right clearances? Is the volume of the space what we want? For example, if I come over here and go to the dimension tool on the toolbar, this is the same dimension tool that we use to move our walls around, but I can use this as a quick way to measure whether or not I've got enough clearance on the stairwell. So I'm going to highlight the top of this landing right here, and then I'm going to highlight the underside of this floor slab, and I can see that I've got 11 feet right there. So that should be more than enough clearance and enough headroom in there so that we don't have to worry about making any modifications. If it came in too shallow, then we would have to start manipulating things, either change the stair or change the floor slab or what have you. So let's go back to the first floor plan and create another one. So I'm going to go back to level 1. And let's create a section that goes through the stair going the other way this time. I'll click the same section tool, and I'm going to start here this time and pull it straight down like so. I'll go all the way through the building. And again, it sees the full depth. Now, if you start here and draw that way, it'll point the other way. What you do if you accidentally draw the section the wrong way is don't undo and start over again. Just use this little grip here, and you can actually flip it to make it look the other way. So it's real easy to reverse a section after you create it. Usually it's not something you want to start over again. If I scroll down Project Browser, It's called section 1 again. So I'm going to right click and rename section it's there. And then let's open that up. Let's go to view. Zoom in a little, and you can now see the stairs going up to here. We're at the balcony right there, and then here's the guardrail beyond. Just another angle giving us a sense of how things are shaping up. Now, one of the things I noticed when I'm in here is this floor slab here is not very bold. The walls here are bold, the walls here are bold, but this floor slab right here is a little bit lighter. And the same is true in this other section here. This floor slab was also lighter. What line weight is being used when you cut through the elements is actually something that's being controlled in a dialog called object styles. It's a global set of settings that affect the entire project. And we can get there on the Manage tab. So if I go to Manage and click on Object Styles, what you're going to see is a list of all the categories that are available in a Revit project. So there's lots of them here. And if we look at the floor category right here, you'll see that there's a line weight column, and the projection and the cut line weight are the same. They're both pen weight 2. Now, pen weight 1 is your thinnest line, and it goes up to, believe it or not, pen weight 16. Okay, now most of the time, 5 or 6 is about the maximum that most people use. If we scroll down a little bit here and find the walls, notice that walls are pen weight 2 in projection. Projection is what you see when it's beyond, when you're looking at the object. And when you cut through it in either plan or section, this is what you're seeing here, and it's pen weight 4. You can see that there's a difference between what the floors are using, pen weight 2, and what the walls are using, pen weight 4. What I'm going to do is click in here, use this little drop down, and choose pen weight 4 for the floors as well. Really simple change. Object styles is global. It affects the entire project. So I only need to make that change once. And when I click OK, you can see the floor is now bold and matches the intensity of the walls. And it doesn't matter now which section I'm looking at. The floor is bold in both cases. Now here it's still light because there we're seeing the floor beyond. We're not cutting through it. The only place we're cutting through it is right here. So that's just a really quick change that we can make. Now, another thing that the section starts to identify for me right here is this little gap right here. So this is something that I might want to go in and modify. To modify that, I would just simply select the floor object and edit its sketch. So let's do that really quick. I'm going to select it. And then here on the ribbon, I can choose Edit Boundary. Now, when I do that, it will tell me that it can't edit the boundary directly from the section view because we're looking at it obliquely. So what it's going to do is offer to open for me one of my floor plans. So I'm going to choose level 2 and click Open View. Let me zoom in on that area, and you can see the problem. This line is on this face of the wall instead of this face of the wall. What I'm going to do is just take that line and drag it over here. And then while I'm at it, I'll take this one and drag it over there. So I've got both of those on the opposite faces of these walls now. And I'll click Finish. Revit's going to ask me about the walls coming up underneath. I'm just going to say no here. And then let's go to the stare at section again. And you can now see that that floor slab is extending underneath the wall, and it makes a little bit more sense. A section cut can do a variety of things for you. Sections are necessary drawings to have along with our document set, but as you can see, because the section is a live cut of the building model, it's a great tool for you to go in and start looking for where the places are that need a little bit more attention. Did we modify this part of the model correctly? Is this connection correct? And when you cut sections in those areas, it gives you a direct view where you can look in and see exactly what's there and react to it in real time. So it's a really powerful and useful tool. And you'll find that most Revit users have dozens and dozens of sections in their projects. We've looked at several different views for our Revit models. We've looked at floor plans, elevations. We created sections in the previous movie. We've even looked at some 3D views. But up until now, the 3D views we've looked at have either already been in the project or we've just simply relied on Revit to create the default 3D view. Let me just reiterate the steps to create a default 3D view. The icon up here on the quick access toolbar kind of looks like a little doghouse or birdhouse. That's the default 3D view icon. And now here's the way that's going to work. If I'm in another view, so here I'm in level 1 floor plan. If I click this icon, I want you to watch right here on the project browser when I click that icon. All it will do is open that existing 3D view that's got the little curly brackets around it. What I want to do is change this view slightly so that we know which one is which to make it very different. Here's what I'm going to do is down here on the view control bar, we have a bunch of icons, and the third one over is this little white cube. And if I click on it, it's a pop-up menu, and I'm going to choose shaded. So a really simple change. Now the model, instead of being a hidden line view, is a shaded view. I'm going to right click on curly bracket 3D here in the browser and rename it. And I'm going to call this just Axon and click OK. Now I'm going to deselect that. And even if I'm not in this view, let me go back to level 1 floor plan. You see it's still under bold. Level 1 floor plan is now bold. Now watch what happens if I click the birdhouse again. Notice that Revit will say, wait a minute, you don't have a default 3D view, so it will just create a new one. Now, the reason I shaded the Axon view is just to very clearly show you it's still here under the new name, but Revit decided to create a new default 3D view. If you want to rely on this icon to open up your default 3D view, you've got to make sure that you keep that default name. Otherwise, Revit will just create a new one, okay? And that's just what it does. All right, now that's not the only way to create a 3D view. There are a few other possibilities. So one such possibility is to create a view that kind of looks like this view. Now this is a perspective view instead of an axonometric. The way this was created was to use the camera tool. What I'm going to do is go back to my floor plan. You typically want to use the camera tool in a floor plan view. Let's take this existing camera view, right click, and rename it, and I'll call this street view. Now let's pretend the parking lot is back here, and I want to do another view from the parking lot. So we're going to make another camera view back there. I'm going to come up here to the birdhouse, but instead of clicking it, I'm going to click the little icon next to it, the little drop arrow. And then I want to choose a camera. Now, camera is real easy to create. All you have to do is click a point where you want to stand. So I'm going to stand over here in what I'm calling the parking lot, and then drag towards where you want to look. So I want to look at the complete building. So you want to make sure that you drag far enough to capture the whole building. So I'm going to click back about here and then click. And now you can see that I'm standing in that direction and I'm looking toward the view. Now you can fine tune by rolling your wheel a little bit and using these little grips here to widen the angle of view. Just be careful that you don't widen it too much because it'll start to distort. Let me see if I can show you that. If I pull it way out like this, see the building doesn't continue, but way over here, it would be kind of fisheye. I'll show you that in a second. So let's keep it right there. It might start to distort here. It's not too bad, so that's okay. But you can fine tune what you have here. And of course, it uses the same default name again, so we might want to rename this one parking view. Camera views you can do anywhere. You're not limited to just exterior shots. You can do interior shots. So let's go back to level 1 and let's do another one. Let's do one from the dining room. So I'm going to zoom in here and we'll stand maybe over here in the waiting area and look toward the dining room. So we'll do the same process. Click where we want to stand, drag towards where we want to look. I want to make sure I'm going to click past the windows here. Let's go about like that, like so. And now we're standing there in the waiting area looking towards the dining area. Now here's where we might be able to witness the fisheye effect if I drag this too far. You can start to see it elongate over here. Now, so far, it's still maybe okay. But if I go too far, you kind of see how distorted this window starts to look. So you do want to be a little cautious about how much you stretch that, because then it starts to look a little bit unbelievable. So I'm going to back that up just a touch. These are stretching out just a little bit, so I'm right on the edge there of what would be acceptable. Same thing in this direction. If I stretch it up a little, it's okay. But if I go too high, it's going to start to distort things. And then, of course, I might want to rename this. Now, there's a lot of other things that we could do in this perspective view. Down here, I could shade it just like we did with the axon. So when I choose that, maybe that's a little bit more interesting. I can also use this little steering wheel icon over here on the right to fine tune the view. The way this works is if you roll your wheel, you're zooming and panning outside of the view, or think of it like this view is a picture frame and you're just zooming in and panning the picture frame. If you want to zoom and pan inside the picture frame, use this little steering wheel. So when I click on that, you'll get this wheel icon right here. And if I click and hold down on pan, you can see that I'm now panning inside the picture frame. If I click and hold down on zoom, I'm now zooming inside the picture frame. Now, of course, you want to be careful because at some point you can crash right into the wall behind you. So just make sure that I do that sparingly. Up and down is like you jump on an elevator and change your height to ride up. So now we're up at that balcony looking down into the space. Let me let go there. Now I'm still looking straight ahead. So I can use the look option and tilt my head down to look down into the space. So now I'm way up in the balcony looking down into the dining room. Now, if you ever get lost, let's say that I zoom out a little too far and I crash through and I'm up in the attic now. This rewind feature is a godsend. Hold it down and you get this little film strip here, and you can use this to kind of back up through all the previous modifications, both backward and forward, and find the one that you were happy with, and then you let go. You can do as many of these camera views as you want, and just make sure you name them descriptively so that people can find them later. And look at the model from several different vantage points. You can use them just as a tool to help you understand your design, or you can even print them out and present them to clients or colleagues as a final presentation tool. So we've seen that we can have lots of different kinds of views in a Revit project: plans, sections, elevations, 3D views. And one of the most powerful reasons to use so many different views is that you can actually edit your model from any view that you like. When you're working in Revit, you're working in a single unified building model. Everything's stored in a single project and it's all connected to one another. So if it's more convenient for you to make an edit in plan, you can do it in plan. If you'd rather do it in elevation, you can do it in elevation. And you can do so without any worry that you'll have to then go and redo the same modification in some other view. This is because these are not disconnected drawings. Rather, they are views of the same unified building model. So you make a change in one view, it changes everywhere. To illustrate that, let me go ahead and open up a couple different views here. I'm in a file called Edit Any View, and I'm currently in the level 1 floor plan. I'm also going to open up the east elevation, the axonometric, and the door schedule. So one of the ways you can tell which views you have currently open is to use this drop down right here, which will show you all of the views that are currently open. So I can see that I have those 4 windows that we just double clicked. Now what I want to do is actually tile them all together on screen. So I'm going to close this drop down, come over here to the view tab, and then over here on the right, I'm going to click tile windows. That will tile all the windows on screen. I'm going to click into any one of the graphical windows and choose zoom all to fit. Now I'm going to fine tune a few of these, zoom in a little bit more on the 3D view, zoom in a little bit more on the plan view, and a little bit more on the elevation view. I'm just doing the wheel for that. Okay, so let's look at a really simple example. I can see here that I've got this really big blank wall here in the east elevation. You can see it also here in the 3D view. It wouldn't really be very easy to do something about that from the floor plan that I currently have open, but there's no reason why I can't do something about that using the elevation. So what I'm going to do is click here to the left of the last window and drag to the right. Now, the one thing you've got to notice here is it's highlighting a bunch of stuff beyond. So I'm going to show you a trick there for selection that I haven't talked about yet. But I'm going to first make the rough selection here, and you see that I've highlighted all 6 windows. Now, in addition to the 6 windows, I got some other stuff, and you can kind of see it in the plan view. I got some tables, I got some countertops. Heck, I even got the stairway in the background. Clearly, I don't want to copy all of that stuff. I only wanted to copy the windows. Well, if you look over here on the properties palette, you can get some feedback as to what you have selected. It says common and then 20. Now, common means that of the 20 items you have selected, these are the properties they have in common, and it's basically nothing. Up here on the ribbon is a filter button. This is a really useful command. It allows you to make a big selection of stuff that you want, too many things, in this case, 20 things when I only wanted 6. You click filter, and then you can clear the checkboxes for all the categories you're not interested in selecting. So I'm going to check none. That's going to clear all the checkboxes. And then instead, I'm going to select only the Windows checkbox, and notice the quantity is 6, which is exactly what I want. So it will deselect all of those other elements. And now I can copy these windows with confidence. So I'm going to go to copy, pick a base point, and then move up to where I want that copy to go. And I'm in the multiple copy, so I'm actually going to click twice to make 2 sets of copies. And then I'll cancel out of the command. Notice that the change is instantly reflected not only in the east elevation, but also in the 3D view. So that's a really simple example. Let's look at another example. Over here in the schedule, I noticed that this door number 5, which is this door right here, I'm going to zoom in on that and plan a little bit. That door over there is just this simple little single swing door, and that's going into the kitchen area. So it probably ought to be a double door, and it probably ought to be a door that can swing in both directions. So I've got the wrong type of door there, but I can identify it here in the schedule and even select it here in the schedule. And then if I click over here in the floor plan, it stays selected. And now I can just open up the list and choose the appropriate type door. So here I've got a door called double flush, double acting. This is from the standard Imperial folder that ships with the software. And you can see that I can choose that double door, and now the change is reflected both in the plan and directly on the schedule. The schedule now reports the new size for that door. Let me open up another view and show you another example. Here's this dining from above 3D view that we created in the last movie. Now I'm going to take this view and adjust it slightly so that it takes up maybe half of the screen here. And let's take a look at these columns here. Notice that all those columns stop a little bit short of the ceiling. And what you're seeing is the steel that's inside of them. And that may be a little bit unsightly for your main dining room. So what I want to do is change the height of those columns so that they go all the way up. Certain edits you can do in any view, depending on the kind of edit that you want to do. You can't do things like move and copy and rotate directly in a perspective view. Notice those buttons are grayed out. If I was in a plan view, all those buttons become available. So if they're grayed out, you can use the perspective view to make the selection, and then you can switch over to a plan. But it turns out that whether or not I'm in perspective or plan doesn't make a difference for what I want to change, because what I want to change is here on the properties palette. If you look, there's a base constraint, level 1. This column starts down at level 1. There's a top constraint, level 2, and that's the problem. It's only going up to level 2. I'm going to make it go all the way up to the roof. Now, the trouble with that is watch the top of the column when I apply that. It's going to go up through the ceiling all the way to the roof level. So now it's a little bit too tall. Let me zoom in just a little bit here to show you. I could come over here and further modify it by putting in a top offset. I'm going to put in -4 feet. And when I apply that, it pulls it down to just underneath the ceiling. Let's go ahead and deselect it, and you can see the final result. So this is yet another example of where you can identify a problem, make the selection, and make an edit in one view. It's reflected in any view. So let me show you that again here. It might be easier to select a couple columns in the plan view, and then we'll be able to see the change interactively in the 3D view as we work. So to do that, I'm just going to click on one of these columns, hold down my Control key, and click the second column. And you can see both of those square columns that we're looking at there in the 3D are highlighted now. I come over here to the properties palette, put them up to the roof, and then set the negative top offset. And when I apply that, you're going to see that those two columns will extend up in the same way as the round one did. So a big advantage of working in a Revit model is that you're actually working on a model. So any change you make, plan, section, or elevation, applies everywhere to all views. You don't have to make the same change over and over again in multiple separate and disconnected drawings. You make the change once in the view that's most convenient, and it automatically takes care of itself everywhere else throughout the model. In this movie, I'd like to introduce you to the room object and specifically how to create a color fill plan from the room objects. So the room objects in Revit represent the actual rooms or the spaces that are enclosed by your walls and other geometry. One of the features that room objects have is the ability to be color-coded to represent various information about our space. So what I'd like to do is create a color presentation plan here that indicates the function of each of the spaces in my overall plan. So the basic process we need to follow is an overall 3 steps. We need to add some rooms, which are going to represent the actual spaces. We need to assign data to those rooms to represent their different functions, and then finally create a color scheme that will color based on those functions. So it starts with the room object, which we can find on the architecture tab here on the room and area panel right here. Now, the way that the room object behaves is that if you move your mouse into the screen, you'll see that if I want to click outside the building, I would get just this generic rectangle, and Revit would actually generate a warning telling me the room was unbounded because there's no surrounding geometry. But as soon as you move your mouse into the space, you see how it starts to conform to the shape of the surrounding rooms. So that's probably a little bit more the behavior that I'm after. The trouble is that most of my space is an open plan, and if I move out here into this main space, you can see that that room fills into everywhere. Public spaces, private spaces, and so on, because there's no separation between any of those. So before I start placing the rooms, I need to do one little bit of pre-work. So I'm going to press escape to cancel out of here. And then right below the room button, there's a room separator button. Room separators are just lines, and you can draw them straight lines or curved lines, whatever shape they need to be, and you use them to separate 2 spaces from one another. So, for example, I might want to have this vestibule space separated from this host area. I might want this host area to be its own separate space. I certainly want to separate the back of house area, so I can put a line there. This prep area here might also want to be its own space. And so notice how I'm ignoring this countertop and I'm going right over to the walls. The countertop is not a room separator, but walls are. So you want to make sure that you're creating fully enclosed spaces. Now, I also don't want the room to flow up here into the stairs. So I'm just going to draw a little L shape right there. Now I'll cancel out of there and let me show you the result of what I just did. So let me make sure that the command is reset. I'll click the modify tool and go back to the room tool, and I'm going to slowly move around. Now we already saw these spaces. Here's the vestibule space. Here's the host area. Here's the prep area. Here's the main dining room. And notice that the main dining room is ignoring the stairwell, and then finally the back of house area here. When you add those room separators in, it makes it really easy for you to place the rooms exactly where you want them. The next thing is you want to place them in the order you want them numbered in, because as you'll see here, the first one you click becomes number 1. And then this one here will be number 2. This will be number 3, the main dining room. So I'll place it out here, our little prep area, and then our back of house area here. And I'll finally end up with this storage area and the 2 restrooms. Now we could certainly rename all of those rooms. It's easy enough to do. Just zoom in on the tag, select the tag, then click again right on the label, and you can input the name of the room. Now I'm going to skip the rest for now and move on to the next step. If you move your mouse around in the space, you'll see that at 4 points around that room tag, there is this X right here. Now if you highlight it, Revit tells you that's the room. If you click when you see that X, it actually selects the room object. And then over here on properties, you can manipulate that room object. So what I want to do is scroll down here and look at some of the other properties. So I've got various properties. I've got comments, occupancy, department. I've got finished information. There's a color scheme already built into this template that colors based on the departments. Now, department is more of a commercial designation. I don't think we would use the word department in a restaurant situation, but in this case, I'm going to use the department field for the function. Now, it is possible to create my own custom function field, but I don't really think it's necessary in this case. I'm just going to borrow department for that purpose. You can type in any value you want here for department. It's just a text field. I can put in public areas, for example, for the main dining room. For this room, I can make that back of house. And I'm just going to put 1 or 2 more designations here. So I can select each of these toilet rooms here using my control key. If you're having trouble selecting one of the rooms, just use your tab key and it will highlight, and then make sure control is held down when you click. And I'll just call these toilet rooms. This one here will also be back of house. Now, if you click in the field and you've already typed a value, you don't have to type it again. You can just use this little drop down here and choose the item that you've already typed in. So Revit keeps track of those. And let's just do one or two more here. This is a public area. And we'll make the host station also a public area. I've designated each of the rooms with a designation. I've numbered them all. I've named a few. We can come back and do the other naming later. But the last step is to add the color scheme now. So if we go to the Annotate tab and look over here on the right, we see a color fill panel. Now, depending on your version of Revit, your color fill panel may have only one button. It may have several buttons. If you're in the Suite version, then you have several buttons. But if you're in Revit Architecture, you only have the one. But what we're looking for is color fill legend. And you can see that's the button right here. I'm going to just place that somewhere off to the side of the screen here. And you can see the message says that there's no scheme currently assigned to the view. As soon as I click, though, it will ask me to do just that. It will ask me to assign a scheme. So you can see here that the space type that it's looking for is spaces. But I don't want to color spaces. In fact, I don't even have any spaces in here. Those are engineering objects. We have rooms, which are architectural objects. So I want to choose rooms. And then notice that the color scheme that will become available is department. So this is why I chose the department field to input my functions. And when I click OK, you will see that Revit will automatically assign a color to each one of those departments that we typed in. And this legend that we placed over here will fill in the label next to each one to show us what each of those colors means. So just a few clicks is all it takes for you to make this very nice graphical presentation, which illustrates the function of all of the various spaces in the model. Now, I did a really simple example here, but you can imagine that if you spent a little bit more time thinking about exactly what you wanted the color scheme to represent, that there's all sorts of things that you could do with this functionality. This movie, I'd like to talk about visibility graphic overrides. We use visibility graphic overrides to customize the way that a particular view displays. All of the model elements that you see in a view represent real-life objects. And as we've seen in previous movies, if you modify them in one view, they modify in all views. But with visibility graphics overrides, we can actually customize the way those model objects display in a particular view. A really simple example is that you could have your walls be purple in one view and leave them black in another view. Or you could turn off your furniture in one view and leave it turned on in another view. And the list of possibilities is virtually endless. I've got a file here on screen called visibility, and it's got a color fill assigned to it right now for the rooms. And what I'd like to do is customize this plan a little bit further. I want to make it into a more complete presentation plan. So I've got some ideas about how I might want to do that. Now, the first thing is best practice dictates that we really ought to do this work in a copy of this floor plan. If you notice over here on my project browser, I'm currently in level 1 floor plan. If I right-click that, I've got some ways that I can duplicate this view. Now, let me kind of contrast these first two to here, duplicate and duplicate with detailing. I'm going to choose duplicate, and notice what I get. I get a copy of the graphics. I get a copy of the view with all the model elements, but none of the annotation gets duplicated. So I lost the dimensions, I lost the room tags. That kind of information is view specific. Now, if I go back to the original level 1, it's still here. So it's not that it deleted it everywhere. It's just that it didn't get copied, actually, is the correct way to say it, to the new copy of the view. Now, let's contrast that to duplicate with detailing. Detailing is just the word that Revit uses to collectively refer to all of that view-specific stuff, the notes, the text, the dimensions, the legends, the tags. Those are all collectively referred to as detailing, and you can see that this time I got a copy of the view complete with all of its detailing. So you can do it either way. I'm going to right-click this new view, and I'm going to rename it as Presentation Plan. I'm going to take the original copy of level 1, and I'll just press my delete key to get rid of that. I don't need that one anymore. Now, there's a few ways we could start to customize the way that this view displays. So the first thing that we're going to look at is the walls. Now, let's go over here to the View tab. And on the graphics panel here, there's a button called Visibility Graphics. And this is the Visibility Graphic Overrides for Floor Plan Presentation. So it's important to realize that any changes we make in this dialog are only going to affect the current view that we have open. They do not apply across the entire project. So only going to focus on the model tab right now, and then only on specific categories. So we've got model categories here, and then in this column, you can see all the various categories listed. Now let's scroll down and locate the walls category. And I'll select that. If you look across at all the columns on the right here, we've got projection and surface, we've got cut, we've got this halftone and detail level. Under projection and surface, we have lines, patterns, transparency, and under cut, we have lines and patterns. All of our walls are being cut through in a floor plan. It's just like you learned in architecture school. Basically, imagine you cutting through the building and a few feet above the floor, and all those walls are actually being cut through. If I want to make a modification to the way that the walls display in this plan, it's the cut that I want to consider. Now, we could customize the line work, which is the outline that we're cutting through, or we could customize the pattern. That's what I'm going to do here. The pattern is the fill that we're seeing between the two lines. Now, currently, there's no pattern being assigned. But if I come down here, I can click this override button. That will give me some options for the fill pattern. And I'm going to choose a pattern with this browse button here. And you can see that I have a whole bunch of patterns to choose from. I can choose crosshatches and I can choose diagonal lines and so on. I'm going to come down here and pick a solid fill. Click OK. Now, it's currently solid black. That may be a little bit overpowering. So let me click right above that on the color. And let's choose a color that's maybe a little bit less intense. So I'm going to pick this greenish color right here. Click OK. And you can see that that updates the solid fill to that color. Let's click OK again and one more time to see the effect. Notice that all of the walls now in this plan are now shaded in with that greenish color in their cut pattern. And that happened across the entire plan. Now it's really important to understand that that change only affects this view, presentation plan. If I go back to level 1 floor plan, notice that these walls are unaffected by the change. So let's go back to presentation. So what else can we do? Well, I'm going to pan this drawing over a little bit and zoom in so that we can see the furniture a little bit more clearly. And let's do another example with the furniture. So I'm going to go back to visibility graphics here on the view tab. And I've got the dialog over here on the left, and I've got my furniture showing there on the right. Let's select the furniture category and look at some of the other things we can do. So if you wanted to, you could override the line pattern. Now this is in projection this time because we're not cutting through the furniture, we're actually looking down on the furniture. So it's the projection line, and you could change the line weight and choose a different line weight. You could change its color or assign a line pattern, a dashed line. So you could make them dashed or dotted lines or what have you. I'm not going to do any of those changes here, so I'll cancel that. But I am going to look at the pattern. Maybe I want to put a surface pattern on the surface of those furniture items. So I'm going to click this override button right here and open up the list of patterns and maybe choose this diagonal crosshatch. When I click OK and then apply that, you can see that this hatch pattern now fills in all the furniture in the same way that we just did with the walls. So that's one option. You could also decide you don't want to see the furniture at all. You could turn it off altogether. I could uncheck this box, click apply, and the furniture would disappear. So regardless of whatever customization you've done to it, it's simply not displaying. I want to stress that we've only hidden it in this view. The furniture still exists in the model. Okay, let's turn it back on. Let's click apply. Next to it is a transparency slider. So if you click the override there, you get the slider. 0% transparent means 100% opaque. So it's a little confusing. Let's drag this slider and make it about 45% transparent. Click OK and apply that. Notice that that greenish color for the fill pattern underneath is now showing through the furniture. So that's another effect that you could start to do there. Let me take that. Let's turn off the transparency, going back to 0%. And what about halftone? Let's see what that looks like. Click apply. Now it goes back to being fully opaque, but notice that instead of solid black lines for the outlines, all the outlines are now in this halftone gray color. As you can see, there's a variety of different things that you can start to do, and I'm only addressing one category. Every category in this list could be customized accordingly, and again, it would apply to this view. So if you start to combine the potential that's available in that visibility graphics dialog and combine that with creating multiple views to serve different purposes, it becomes very easy for you to create highly focused views that are specialized on delivering a certain kind of information. So the visibility graphics command is this very powerful tool that allows you to achieve multiple views, each focused towards a very specific purpose in your document set.